Hi guys, welcome back to Beyond Borders. We are still on our Poland series and we have learned so much about the history of Poland and what Poland as a country has really been through for the past few hundred years. So today we are watching a video of how Poland became the superpower that it is today.
Or how it's becoming
how it's becoming the superpower, so we can kind of see what is happening there currently and not more focused on history. We want to get to know Poland as much as possible because we are planning to do a week visit next year, early next year.
So if you have any recommendations of places to visit or maybe videos that you would recommend to watch, drop it down in the comments down below. But let's get into today's video.
Let's do it.
Why Poland is quietly becoming
Europe's next superpower.
This is the classic stereotype of Poland. A grey, poor, post-communist country with nothing to offer but cheap, unqualified labor. But this stereotype is no longer true, and Poland of today looks more like this.
So that grey stereotype is what I personally had viewed of Poland before visiting there and getting to know it a bit better. That was my view. Communist, part of a regime under Russia, USSR, Eastern European country. Obviously, my perception has changed wildly. Obviously, Central Europe, very modern, beautiful people, vibrant culture, and it basically changed and shifted my mindset completely. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I mean, I didn't really have any specific stereotype of Poland. I mostly thought Europe was in as a whole grey
in the winter. But
well, we are currently experiencing our first European winter. As South Africans, it's not something we're used to at all. So I guess that's why we thought the whole Europe is grey all the time, which is not true. We had the best summer ever.
But it is cold now.
It is cold.
And we are looking forward to the summer.
Yes.
In the past 30 years, Poland went through an incredible transformation, growing more than any other economy in Europe, and faster.
That was Warsaw. That is the part that was 85% destroyed, the city that was 85% destroyed in World War II. And look at it now. It's like a modern, New York or a big city. It's crazy.
Than Asian tigers like Singapore, South Korea, or Taiwan. Today, Poland is emerging as a major technological hub. The Polish economy might overtake the UK by 2030, and after years of suffering from a massive brain drain, highly skilled Poles are now coming back home. And it goes way beyond the economy, as Poland is building one of the most powerful militaries in Europe, and quickly becoming one of the most influential European countries.
Two comments on that. So I've got a few Polish friends and they keep telling me of how Poland is becoming super tech focused, and they have been for the past 10, 15 years, focusing very much on AI and software. And I think where the world is moving towards, it was a very good move to make 20 years ago. And also the army having almost being now the strongest in Europe, it's pretty, if you focus on those two, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, they're taking all precautions now to build a strong economy, build a strong army so that they have
they can now defend themselves.
Defense in place and not allow anything to happen again to their people.
Yeah.
As all of these changes continue to pick up pace, it's getting impossible to ignore Poland's growing importance. But there is still one thing that could destroy the entire Polish miracle. A threat not from the outside, but from within. So how did Poland manage to become Europe's biggest success story? Why is it doing so much better than everyone else? And what is the challenge threatening to end everything that it has achieved? This is the rise of Poland. But to understand why Poland's transformation is such a big deal, we need to understand where it started from. In the 20th century, after becoming the first country to be invaded by Nazi Germany and losing 20% of its population in World War II, Poland became part of the Eastern Bloc, as one of the Soviet-controlled satellite.
That 20% was mainly Jews from the last video that we watched. It was mainly the Jewish population that were completely almost wiped out because of the Nazis.
I heard someone put in the comments that even before the Jews were slaughtered, there was a mass murder of Polish, which I'm not sure about, but
Comment it down below.
satellite states. Like in the rest of the Eastern Bloc, the 40 years of communism were times of deep economic isolation, stagnation, and overall hopelessness. Poland had to import the Soviet system of centrally planned economy, where state owned almost everything. Private businesses were mostly non-existent, and since they were basically a Soviet colony, the Polish economy was subservient to interests of the Soviet Union, and forced.
Obviously, communism doesn't work. I mean, look at what they went through. Look at what the country went through, and looking at where it is now, it's completely polar opposites. I mean, people have got freedom of expression, freedom to do what they want, within the laws, obviously, and within the boundaries. But at the same time, it's so much different today. And I think that whole being a satellite state under the USSR or Russia had a dramatic impact on the people and how they were forced to basically be closed off to the rest of the world and had to do what someone else was saying. You can imagine how frustrating it must have been.
Yeah, absolutely.
To make, buy, and sell whatever Moscow wanted it to, whether it made economic sense or not. As a result, the centrally planned economy was deeply dysfunctional and mismanaged, crippled by constant shortages of basic goods and lack of resources. When the communist regimes of Eastern Europe finally fell in
It's the Berlin Wall falling, like 1990s, I think, 1989, somewhere around there.
1989, and Poland became free and independent, it emerged from behind the Iron Curtain as one of the poorest countries in Europe, with highly dysfunctional infrastructure and public services, and with basically no experience with capitalism and participating in a global economy. The average salary.
That is why majority of Polish people left. And that's why they just left their country, because they just couldn't afford. Someone was saying they couldn't afford just basic necessities and basic goods. And now that Poland is like becoming a superpower, and it is a lot stronger in the economy, better currency, better state of living, people are returning home because they feel like it's a good place to live and it's a good place to raise a family. It's safe. It's got all these factors that you look for in a stable economy and a stable place to live.
Yeah, and I mean, like he said, they experienced a big brain drain. Like when people finished their studies, they just left, and now they're returning. So they're getting their skill back.
Yeah,
and that's basically what you need to get a functional country.
Salary was 10 times lower than in Germany, and the country was struggling with hyperinflation. In other words, it wasn't a country you would bet on to become a major success. But skip 30 years ahead into the future, and that's exactly what happened. So, how did Poland do it? From 1992, Poland managed to grow consecutively for almost 3 decades, achieving the longest period of growth in modern European history. Now, not many countries are able to do that, and the reason.
For me, it's crazy how long it takes to rebuild an economy. It's not going to take a year or 2 or 5 years, like one term of a president being in place. It's 30 years, 3 decades of hard work. It's
consistency.
So, I mean, like, for example, South Africa, with its current economy, it's going to take, like, with a good government coming in place, 30 years for it to return to some form of normal stableness, which is scary because 30 years from now, we're like 60. It's like our kids won't experience it. It's more.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, I mean, just to see that it's possible, like you can go from nothing to what it is today, it gives me hope that like maybe South Africa can fix itself one day if they really want to, because obviously it's not easy. 30 years of consistent growing, that takes effort and that takes willpower.
And it takes time.
Absolutely.
The reason is that usually when they find a successful strategy, they tend to stick to it long after it stops working. But Poland, so far, managed to find a different growth strategy for each of the 3 decades, which allowed it to grow so fast for so long. Starting in the early 1990s, its main challenge, like in every other post-communist country, was how to transition from a centralized, state-owned economy to a capitalist one. In most countries, these transitional reforms were in one way or another quite problematic. Either they took too long, or they became pretty corrupt, and much of the state wealth was transferred into hands of a few wealthy oligarchs who got rich because of their political connections. Poland, on the other hand,
For me, what shows that Poland has stood out is that there were many Eastern Bloc countries, and if it was so easy to do it, why did Ukraine, I think it's Lithuania, all those other countries, why didn't they also become superpowers, you know? So clearly the Polish were doing something right, and they had a good structure in place, and it was working, and that hard work paid off. And that's why they are where they are today, because of that.
Yep.
On the other hand, managed this transition arguably better than others. It transitioned to capitalism quickly, but privatized most of the state-owned companies slowly, and a few years later than most of its neighbors, after the chaos calmed down, and after it became a little bit harder to steal everything. Thanks to that, it became pretty much the only post-communist country without an economy dominated by oligarchs, and without an economic crash in the 1990s.
And that is why they were successful. It wasn't just a complete takeover by capitalism. It was slow transition, so it didn't allow, hands to get into the pot.
Corruption.
And basically take it. It was slow, it was transitioned, and it wasn't just immediate.
That's clever.
But despite the good start in the early 2000s, this wasn't enough anymore in order to grow, and so the next phase was about globalization. In 2004, Poland joined the European Union and the open European market with a free movement of goods and services. Without any barriers between Poland and the rest of Europe, it made sense for West.
It seems to me like, so what he's saying is basically in a period of 30 years, so he's saying, for 10 years, they followed a strategy, and then as soon as that strategy started to maybe not be as effective anymore, those guys at the very top had to sit together and make super difficult decisions on what they're going to do to up the country and up the economy to a next level. And, joining the European Union, it must have been a difficult decision for them, but they knew that it was necessary for the next growth phase.
The thing about joining the European Union is that you're normally subjected to laws and governing bodies that force you to do certain things. But even with that, Poland has taken a stance and said, for example, migrants, no migrants. They've taken a stance and said no. So they've stood still by their morals, stood by what they believe in, and they've managed to do that, even being part of something bigger than the country itself.
Yeah.
Western European companies to move their manufacturing over to Poland, where they had a large and a very cheap pool of workers at their disposal. And while these companies kept most of the profit, Poland got enough out of it to keep growing at a pretty fast pace. And joining the EU brought another major benefit, since one of its key principles is redistribution of money from wealthier member states to the less developed ones, in order to balance the wealth disparity.
I heard about this, and the move to the European Union was super good and popular because it basically shifted money from other European countries that were more richer to Poland, and Poland capitalized on that and basically took advantage of the situation and got more money than other European countries. They leveraged that, and that's why they got a lot of money for investment and to grow the economy even more.
Across the Union. After joining, the Eastern European states started to receive a lot of money, and Poland managed to use them to build and improve everything from roads to universities. And again, in a lot more efficient way than in many other Eastern European countries. But that can still only take you as far, and many countries following a similar trajectory eventually fall into the so-called middle-income trap. If your economy is based on providing cheap labor for foreign companies, you can only grow to a certain level. And if you can't offer anything else apart from that, and you don't have any major companies of your own, you're stuck.
Yeah.
But so far, Poland seems to be avoiding that. 15 years
For me, it's cool to see what happens when money actually goes to where it's supposed to go. Building infrastructure, putting it into schools, hospitals,
Universities.
roads.
That's at the end of the day what keeps your people in your country. Like, why would you want to leave if the infrastructure is good? There are good universities. It's safe. It's beautiful. It's clean. It's modern. Why would you want to leave? Like,
For me, the thing is, it's not only that, but you get to see where your money is going, like the tax bill, like you get to see where it's going. And that's probably a rewarding feeling when you know your government is doing something that you are pro and you like.
you're proud. You must feel really proud.
Yeah.
years ago, foreign companies were coming in to hire low-skilled and low-paid workers for menial labor. But today, they're coming because Poland has one of the largest pools of engineering talent in Europe. And instead of warehouses and basic factories, companies like Google are opening research and development hubs. Now, that said, Poland is still relatively poor, at least compared with most of Western Europe. But the growth so far has been impressive and unusually inclusive. Average wage.
What I heard is that the Poles generally have a lower salary on average than European countries, but a lot of younger Poles, like the younger generation, have all gone and studied very in-demand degrees. So they are in demand all over Europe and the world. And those people are basically going outside of Poland, their home country, getting skills. And a lot of them, if you speak to them, actually want to return home at some point.
Yeah, return to Poland.
Because they love their country so much. So you can imagine when all those people come back after being abroad for so many years and they come with that wealth and that knowledge, how it's going to even project even further.
Wages in the country massively increased, while inequality remained low. And so it's not a growth that would only exist on paper, or only help select few, but it actually trickled down to the rest of the society. And there's one more area outside of economic growth where Poland has been getting a lot of attention lately, and that's its unprecedented military buildup. Historically, Poland has some good reasons to be a little paranoid. Stuck between Germany and Russia, it has been invaded, partitioned, colonized, and stripped of its independence time and time again.
We saw obviously the history of Poland in our 3-part series, and they went through a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, for over 100 years,
123 years, they were not even on the map.
they weren't even on the map. They didn't exist. So, I mean, if you've been subject to all of that for so many years, for hundreds of years, I would want the strongest army ever to prevent that from ever happening again.
Yep. No one's going to mess with Poland.
Specifically, if you, like they said, jammed between other countries like Germany and Russia.
They have a history of starting trouble.
Yeah, you want to be as strong as possible so that you can prevent this from ever happening again, which makes complete sense.
Again. And even though today it's in NATO, this historical memory is still there. And while most European countries were taking their peace dividends, Poland has kept military funding at one of the highest levels in NATO. And after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it went into an overdrive. It announced that in just a few years, it will increase its military spending to 5% of its GDP, higher than any other NATO member.
You can imagine all the other European countries checking Poland out, and they don't want to cause
Poland is setting such a big benchmark right now. Like they're making a statement, a big statement
to the world.
to the world.
Double the size of its armed forces to 300,000 and buy thousands of tanks, fighter jets, and other military equipment. And before the end of the decade, Poland plans to have the most powerful ground forces in Europe, in what would be one of the most ambitious military buildups in modern European history. Now, that being said,
No one wants to cause problems with Poland anymore,
No.
knowing all this information. So people should take notice.
Poland has achieved so far is impressive, and what it plans to achieve even more so. But it's yet to be seen if all that will actually happen. Despite its successes, there are some significant risks that could kill the entire Polish miracle, and not everyone is so bullish on Poland's future. For a long time, demography has been considered the #1 threat, as around 500,000 people have left the country in the last 30 years. But now it looks like Poland managed to reverse this trend. In recent years, it has seen a reverse brain drain, as Poles and people with
Yes.
Polish heritage living abroad have started coming back to the country. And
That's what we just mentioned.
The Canadian guy, we met a Canadian guy at a backpackers a few weeks ago, and he had a Polish mom and a Canadian dad. And he visited Poland on his European tour, and he wants to return to his roots and move to Poland. That's how much he loved it. So that's just like evident. And it's cool seeing it because we've actually experienced it while speaking to someone.
And since the country took in over 1.5 million Ukrainian refugees, the demographic trends are looking much better. And so there are really two major risks. First, while the growth has been impressive, Poland has not actually avoided the middle-income trap completely. So far, it's still massively reliant on foreign investments, and although tech centers are being opened in Warsaw, they are set up by foreign companies, rather than by Polish ones. And while that brings jobs and growth, once again, there is a limit to how high you can grow, since most of the profits will always end up leaving the country in the end. In order to break into the big leagues, you need your own domestic giants in sectors with high added value, and Poland doesn't have that, or at least not yet. But the far bigger risk is of a completely different nature, and it concerns a part of the Polish story that we haven't touched on yet. The thing is that Poland is a deeply, deeply divided country, so much that we can almost talk about two different Polands. One liberal and progressive, and the other deeply conservative and religious. Like in the US, the two Polands are finding it increasingly difficult to coexist together, and surveys show that both sides are highly suspicious of each other, intolerant to opposing views, and increasingly refusing to compromise.
What I also read, someone saying in the comments of a video that we did like a few weeks ago, is someone was saying that, you know, the chance of like a civil war is pretty high because there's two very opposing sides in Poland, and they don't always necessarily agree on each other's views. And that is what is actually dividing Poland. So even though it's a strong country, strong people, strong culture, growing economy, it ticks all the boxes, the main problem is that there's two essentially groups of people arising, and they're very divided, and it might split Poland because of the division in the views.
What are some of the key disagreements?
I'm not 100% sure. I'm not a specialist in it. So if you know, please drop it down in the comments below, and like, what are your views on it, and what is the two different views in Poland, and why do they differ so much?
Is it not something that can just be resolved?
I don't think so. I think it's very deep-rooted.
And for years, the current conservative government has been criticized by the liberal opposition for supposedly bending the rules in order to stay in power. And it has had a growing beef with the European Union that's threatening to cut Poland off from EU funds as a punishment for not upholding the rule of law. And
see what I said?
Yeah.
They're not abiding by the European laws. They're just doing their own thing, which is good, but it can also be detrimental in the long run, I think.
Just from a financial aspect, probably, or investment aspect. But
I think they've capitalized on it. They've grown a lot, so maybe it might be time to cut ties, like a Brexit, you know, like a Polexit.
A Polexit.
The thing is that whatever side you cheer for, the end result is bad for both, and for Poland in general. The country needs both parts of the population to coexist and work together, and it needs the EU if it wants to be truly successful. And if it doesn't manage to do that, the Polish miracle will be over soon, before it has really started.
Very cool video. I feel like it's just, watching these videos, it's in a sense rewarding, because I don't think I've ever done, or we've ever done, so much research on a country before visiting it.
And it's going to be so refreshing actually going there and knowing exactly what happened. You know, we're going to be walking on the land that has so much history.
And we'll be able to relate with people to a certain extent. The next thing is going to be to try and do some Polish language. You know, try and do some basic phrases just to get up the proficiency. I'm not saying we're going to be native or able to speak fluent.
Basic phrases.
Just some basic phrases just to say hi and
We already have cinque.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please throw it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss out on any of our latest videos. We're in the Poland series. We still have a lot of videos to get through, which we're pretty excited about. But yeah, this is it for today's video though.
Beyond Borders.
Over
and out.